My phone, but not the computer won't get out.
I might have an issue.
Well,
Okay. I am just. Good.
I come to all of them. Yes. I'm not either, but it's part of my job.
Okay, so what?
I work for a weekly county.
Okay. Were you down there at the party?
No.
Oh, okay. But a couple weeks ago, they had the big party down there.
No, I got it.
Music festival.
Oh, that's the other association. I work for Orlando.
Oh, the landowners, yeah. Oh. Okay. Well, just here to keep an eye
Hi, how you doing?
I think.
After me.
We were there.
Oh, just, okay. Very. Yeah.
So they went to see you again. It was good at the time, right?
Yeah, make sure to call them up. Make sure to call them up to talk. In the front of the room.
Oh, yeah.
All right, 7 o'clock, I call this meeting to order. All rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, Nick.
Al Dika. Here. Nancy Rondell. Here. John Cox. John Leo. Here. And Matt Bogira.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
All right, citizens comment, if you're here to address us about something that's not on the agenda, this is your opportunity. Tonight, we'd like to have people come up and sit or stand at the table, and there is a 3-minute time limit. And Pam, you're up. People get up there.
Hello, good evening. My name is Valerie Hosey. I'm at 598 East Main Street, right here in the corner of Zola, Maine. A decision to amend the method of confirming residency was made around April of 2022. This was done at the direction of the city council members and city staff. They simplified the process by requiring the resident would be on the registered voter roll. To be on the registered voter roll, one would think you would need to live in the city of Harbor Springs. Maybe not. However, there is a member on the zoning board as well as the planning commission that was appointed by this city council who does not qualify to be on any board for the city of Harbor Springs. There was an article in the Petoskey Review around the April 2022 date that brought attention to the matter. The article mentioned the amendment and who may serve on local boards. Many people stated that it was common knowledge that Bob Toma lived and voted in Little Traverse Township. He has a home under construction in the city of Harbor Springs, and this home has been under construction for approximately over 5 years. So there are no final inspections completed and therefore no certificate of occupancy. Naturally, there are folks in Harbor Springs who are aware of this information, and people are questioning the intent of the oversight. Bob Toma voted in the May 3rd election in Little Traverse Township and has since participated and voted on 2 different boards for the city of Harbor Springs. These were board issues of residents, these were board issues of residents who live in their homes in the city of Harbor Springs. Bob Toma is registered where he lives in Little Traverse Township. Bob Toma lives near the airport in Little Traverse Township. It's easy to confirm his address. If you go onto the Emmett County property search, you will find Bob Toma as the owner of 501 Piper Street in Harbor Springs. However, under owner and taxpayer information, it shows his full address on E Harbor Drive in Little Traverse Township, where he lives full-time and receives his mail. City Council, why have you allowed this to happen? The 5 of you appointed Bob Toma, if I'm correct. Am I correct on that? The 5 of you appointed? Yes? Is that a yes?
Sure.
Is that a yes, John?
I don't remember specifically, but it
Okay.
came before council.
Obviously, it was before council and passed.
Okay. So you are the ones responsible for this major oversight. Unfortunately, this error may look intentional to many of the folks who do live in the city of Harbor Springs. One other unfortunate circumstance is Bob Toma has just very recently, and I'm stating very recently, registered to vote in the city of Harbor Springs.
Ma'am,
The
could you
same
wrap this
folks,
up?
excuse me, the
No,
same.
3 minutes. have been up.
Your 3 minutes are up.
So,
You'll need to wrap this up.
Well, I think that this is important enough. I have about 4 more sentences.
a few minutes.
I think this is important enough to
Quickly,
finish up. I
please.
appreciate that. Thank you. The same folks who uncovered the oversight heard that the recent registration of Bob Toma may look dubious at best. Does the city of Harbor Springs allow a home under construction with no certificate of occupancy, never to have been lived in, be used to qualify for registration to vote while still living full-time in Little Traverse Township? If that answer is yes, then the new amendment may have done its job. It created the ability to manipulate the process of fair governing. Unfortunately, it might have created new loopholes for possible city mismanagement. The unintended consequences of reducing voter registration requirements, it just looks bad. Thank you. Here are,
So I'd like to address that, council. So what Ms. Hosey is missing here is that the Planning Enabling Act allows for 2 non-city residents to serve on the planning commission, for example, and that our amendment to our code says that unless state law says otherwise, this does not apply to the planning commission and zoning board otherwise. So I think you've misread the.
I'm sorry, I didn't even catch that.
So the Michigan Planning Enabling Act allows 2 non-city residents to serve on the planning commission. And the amendment we made to our city code was to state that you have to be a city registered voter to serve on board unless state law says otherwise. And state law here says you can serve, for example, on the planning commission. You can have up to 2 township residents on the planning commission.
And they can be voting members.
Yes, they can be voting members, yes. So that's just one example, so.
My name's Andy Pye, I live at 815 Ottawa. This is true on the Planning and Enabling Act, but also the city has violated Planning and Enabling Act numerous times. They've had many people sitting on the Planning and Enabling Act.
Andy, you're talking to us, not to the crowd.
Had many people on the Planning and Enabling Act, or many people on the Planning Commission that were in violation of said act. This really applies to the Zoning Enabling Act, which was violated when Councilman Rondell was given a variance against city code. That's all I have to say.
Anyone else for citizens comment?
Comment on something else.
It's not on the agenda. This is your chance.
Here,
So, you're in the hot seat.
all right, I'll be in the hot seat. It's about the substation that is.
It's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
Okay. I've spent the week looking around.
It is on the
Yeah.
agenda, so you
Yeah,
probably
it's
should
on-
wait.
Oh,
till
it
that
is on
comes
the
up. Yeah,
agenda?
it is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
I'm
okay.
terribly sorry. Didn't have my glasses on. All right.
All right. We'll get to you. Anyone else for not on the agenda items? No, anyone on the computer? Raise your hand. Squad. Okay, on to the consent agenda. Any issues at the table?
No, I read through it and it seemed to make sense to me. I would make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second that.
Matt O'Gara,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell.
Yes.
John Cox. Al Baker.
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
Motion carried.
On to,
City Manager. All right, item 3A, public safety millage ballot proposal. So as you all know now, the Headley override failed 51 to 49% in the August 2nd election. The deadline for placing a millage proposal on the November 8th election is tomorrow at 4 p.m. So there are many reasons why people voted for no on Headley, but some of the comments I've heard back were, that they would vote differently, perhaps on a special specific millage and perhaps not as large of an increase in a millage rate. So as I presented to council in November of 2021 and February of 2022, I had suggested then possibility of a police millage, a public safety millage, as well as potential other millages, including a recycling, brush and leaf pickup millage, as well as others. So I put together a little presentation on the police and fire millage and public safety millage to see if that's a possibility that council wants to explore. And there's another option for the millage that we prepared was for the brush leaf and recycling pickup as well. So I'll go through that right now. So the question is, why should the city seek a public safety millage? There's a few main reasons here. First is the residents have expressed on numerous occasions that they want to maintain existing levels of police and fire operations. It would guarantee some revenue for police and fire operations. And then also public safety is the largest portion of the city's general fund budget. Many residents have expressed that they do not want to lose other city services and operations. And while public safety millage will not solve the long-term negative effects of Headley in Proposal A, it would temporarily alleviate a revenue shortfall. I don't know why this keeps on doing that, but. So public safety expenses versus other general fund expenses. Since 2002, the police department expenses have increased 115%. Since 2002, the fire department expenses have increased 155%. Since 2002, the other general fund expenses have increased by 44%. So in 20 years, the police department expenses have increased at over twice the rate of other general fund expenses, and the fire department expenses have increased at over 3 times the rate of other general fund expenses. The inflation rate has averaged 2.5% annually since 2002. So the value of $1 has increased by 72% since 2002, meaning a product valued at $100 in 2002 costs $172 today based on inflation. The city spent in 2002 about $1,265,000 on non-public safety general fund operations. If we go by a 72% inflationary increase, it means the city should be spending $2,176,000 on those same services and operations as 2002. Instead, in 2022, we are spending only $1,821,000. And over the last 5 years, we averaged $1,932,000, which is 13% less than needed to keep up with inflation. So there you see police expenses since 2002. There you see fire department expenses since 2002, and then other general fund expenses since 2002. Over the last 2 decades, public safety expenditures have increased from about 31 to 33% of the general fund budget to 35 to 40% of the general fund. So public safety has increasingly taken up a larger portion of the general fund budget. So that means the other services and operations have taken up a smaller portion, percentage-wise, of the general fund budget. In surveys of the residents, in a survey of 274 residents, 97% said existing fire and police operations are relevant to keeping Harbor Springs a quaint and vibrant community. In a survey of 115 residents, 90% are more satisfied or just as satisfied with police as they were 10 years ago. Also, 94% of residents are very satisfied or satisfied with police protection, and 90% are very satisfied or satisfied with the fire department protection. Only 3 respondents on those surveys have stated any sort of dissatisfaction with interactions with the Harbor Springs police officers. So therefore, what we can summarize from this is that the public values and desires existing levels of police and fire protection. Public safety expenses are a larger portion of the general fund budget today than they were 20 years ago. And the public safety millage would guarantee funding for police and fire operations while allowing the city to continue maintaining its existing general fund services and operations. So there's basically two questions here. Should existing non-public safety general fund services and operations suffer because public safety expenses have increased? And do residents want the same level of general fund services and operations as they enjoyed 20 years ago? So the millage is really asking for a 1 mil increase for a period of 5 years, or up to 1 mil for a period of 5 years. So this means a 1 mil increase in taxes. Half of the city's homestead properties receive less than $110 on their property tax bill. The city would be able to guarantee about $316,000 annually for fire and police operations during the next 5 years. And voters would have the choice to renew the public safety village when it expires in 5 years. So again, here's a table showing what the increase would look like for a property's taxable value. The low end of a $50,000 taxable value could be an annual increase of $50. As you get higher, that amount goes up proportionally to the taxable value. So what is different between this proposed public safety millage and a Headley override? Well, the maximum total general fund millage after 5 years under public safety millage would be 6.7 mils. The maximum total general fund millage after 5 years on the Headley override would have been up to 8.0 mils. So it's definitely a lower maximum millage rate. If this millage would expire after 5 years, it only can be renewed if residents vote to renew it. In the Headley override, there was no expiration date on the millage. It would also guarantee funding for police and fire, while the other Headley override did not have any guarantees for any services or operations. So to summarize, that's a very brief and I guess bird's eye view of city operations, but it definitely shows that police and fire are critical components of the city. They're some of the most essential government services, and the public is very appreciative and desires the police and fire protection that we have. And it shows that while they're taking up, while we want that, the effect of increased cost for police and fire means that the other services and operations are suffering because of it. And as we saw that with the projected cuts we would have had to make last year, about $120,000. And we're going to only see that increase as we go forward. So this is one solution to guarantee some money for the police and fire, for public safety, while also not letting other general fund operations and services suffer because of it. And I do see, at least one person wearing a back the blue shirt here. So I think it would have support.
Idea, so we definitely take some pressure off the general fund and guarantee keep our services the same. Police and fire. I'm on the fire board. They're having a hard time keeping up with we're having a hard time keeping up with expenses on the fire board. So it would be helpful to manage.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just saying that I think it's a good idea. I also serve on the fire department board, and we're having a hard time maintaining our budget because of increased costs. So we struggle on that.
And this is one of the options for revenue for the city we've been talking about since last October.
Correct.
Seems like a compromise position to me. Yeah, I'd like to try it. We'll try to get it passed.
See what folks do.
Yeah, see what folks do.
Please speak up.
Speak up so we can all hear.
This seems like an attempt at compromise from what we proposed last time to nothing at all. And we clearly need the money. We're not doctrine figures or anything. If we want to maintain the level of service that we've had over the last 10, 20 years, we have to have more money to do that. And this seems like a reasonable approach. You didn't like what we offered last time. And so we're trying it again because we do need the money to keep going.
Well, and to clarify, to expand on that, the latest vote showed that there was only 11 vote difference between the people that wanted to pay for the services that they're getting and the people that didn't want to do that.
I agree.
So it's on the hairy edge. And as a compromise, I think this allows the city to continue to provide the services that people want to have. We have to pay for what we get.
I think it's a good idea. It gives the voters a chance to tell us what they want.
You know what? We'll have to make adjustments on the budget. Eliminate things that we don't want to have to eliminate that made Harbor Springs a special place. Anything, John? Any public comment?
Go for it.
Are the people aware of the cuts you have to make, what they are, or is that just something you saw?
They were at budget time last year.
I mean, a lot of times if they don't know what's being cut back, then they just say no to raising taxes.
Well, I say last year, we tried to cut the lifeguards at Public Beach and the leaf and brush pickup, and there was, no one wanted any of that eliminated. So we were lucky enough to find some extra money in an extra account. Did it for another year, but next year, if the millage doesn't pass, we would have to cut 150,000.
I don't think we know exactly what the amount will look like until we get to the budget season, and we won't know until
Right, until we get to the.
we get there, what could be cut. And I don't think we should say X, Y, or Z will be cut, because we don't know that. But I do think that, as Clerk Whitaker and I have been saying for a few years now, is that the problem is revenue. And if we don't have revenue sources, then you have to cut.
So as part of the next budget cycle, potential cuts will be identified. And my guess is that they will be more because the cost over the last year of products and services have gone up. So it won't just be the 2 or 3 items that we identified last time. I think there'll be more. But that's part of the city analysis of the budget that the city will propose for the next budget cycle.
One of the great things about Harbor Springs is how safe it is, you know, how these kids run around town on bikes. Oh, yeah, okay, let's see if I can do this without hurting myself or someone else.
Don't hurt yourself.
Linda Rockwitz, 519 East 3rd Street. Our safety in our small town is paramount. I mean, I don't know how many times I've talked to people say, oh yeah, the kids can ride their bikes downtown and be on their own and you don't have to worry about them. And when we first bought our property 41 years ago, people left their wallets in the car, they left the car running. It was just, you know, it was really Newberry. And how can we not support that? And our fire department is volunteer. And if, you know, these guys turn out any time of night or day to come save you and your property. So to me, this is just a fabulous idea. Here we go.
Kathy Machel, 560 Sergeant Street. I guess my only question is, and it's just informational, is it appears that we're looking at more revenue potentially than we were looking at for the Headley Amendment. Is that true?
So the Headley was 0.5 mils annually up to 8.0 mils. So
Right.
this would be 1 mil and that's it for 5 years. So
Okay.
so the Headley could have gone up to 8.0 mils, or
Right.
whatever the Headley rolled back, reduce it down to.
I'm looking at the dollar amount of
Yeah,
revenue.
so the year, so for this would be a one-time yearly raise of whatever the median value is, was about $110 for the median value house. And that would apply each year for the 5 years, $110. The half a mil for the Headley was, for the median house would have been around $54, $55.
Mhm.
And that could have gone up to 110, and another half a mil the next year, another half mil the year after. if
Oh,
council
I
deems
see,
necessary.
I
So,
see.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Just when Victor shows a chart and it shows like 2022 going like that, I just want everybody here to know that I spend money like it's my own out of my pocket. And I've done that since I've been here. And that spike is a resemblance, that chart right there, of retirements. A couple of spikes. Officer Timmons is retired this year. If you go back a couple years, Officer Heater and Officer Peter both retired, and they get a buyout when they retired. So I just want to assure everybody here that if you vote for this, that I will not, I've spent wisely since I've been here, and I will continue that practice. This is the same uniform I started with in 2017. So it is what it is, and I watch our money, and two of the officers are here, and Bill attests to that. When they come and ask me to buy something, it's like, we go through a process, and so it's not like if you were to vote for this, I'm gonna spend recklessly or anything. I'm gonna continue to hold that line, but I know it's all your money, and I treat your money like my money, and I watch every dime that we spend, so I just wanted to assure you that.
That's a good point. So this village is not asking for additional money for the police or fire expenditures. It's asking to guarantee that money, which has increased over the last 20 years. And Chief, again, is right that a lot of these spikes are due to retirements, but we have to account for retirements. We have to plan for retirements as well. So you're gonna see these spikes. It's never gonna be a straight, line, but you're gonna see these spikes. And some years it's gonna be more than other years because of retirements or because of capital purchases, whether we need new tasers or new equipment. So the budget always has spikes up and down. But the fact is that this $300,000, up to $300,000, it could be gained from a millage, a 1 mil for public safety, is not to add on to police or fire, but it's to cover the historical costs that have happened, as well as to maintain existing services and operations.
A lot of people see new faces, so they think we're adding officers. And when I started in 17, we had 5 full-time officers and 2 part-time officers. Both part-time officers worked significant hours in the summer, like they both worked full-time in the summer. It was Officer Taylor and Officer Reese. When Officer Taylor retired in 18, we couldn't find a part-time replacement. So that's when I went to council, and we basically added a half of an officer. We hired Officer Swiss. So we went from 5 full-time and 2 part-time to 6 full-time and 1 part-time. And then because of the school resource officer, we eliminated that other part-time officer. So now we have 7 full-time. So it seems like we have a lot of officers, but basically since 17 when I started, we've only added about a half an officer to our budget cycle. But we have a lot of new faces too. So it's like people that you see, Officer Peter, who've been here for a long time, and Officer Heater, who've been here for a long time. Now Steve's retired. We've replaced them with really good young people. And I'm really, really pleased with the staff we have. And 3 of them, Josh is behind me. He'll be the next one retired, in 20 years maybe. That's just so you see the new faces. It doesn't mean that we're replacing people or that we're adding people. We're just replacing existing people.
Yeah, I know many people received a letter as we went through last meeting about how the city added a school liaison officer at $80,000 a year. That, like Chief Knight said, that's not an additional expense to the city. The school covered 3/4 of it, and we eliminated a part-time officer for that. So a lot of people might have been misled by that information, but we did not add a new person with that school liaison officer.
Well, in fact, the school proposed that position, if I remember correctly, and they felt strongly enough about safety for the schools that they wanted a full-time position.
The school approached me about it, and so we took that Officer Reese's hours at part-time. It might have cost us a little bit more money, but it wasn't a stiff amount. We had a full-time officer year-round. And so, because right now, police officers are hard to come by, and we're blessed to have them. I have somebody replace Steve, but he's sort of apprehensive right now based on this conversation right here. And so, thank you, I'm done.
Anyone else?
We can't hear. The city of Harbor Springs is on mute.
Thanks, Jeff. So over the last couple of years, as I said, we've received many complaints and concerns about increased noise, whether it's loud parties, construction starting early, church bells, airplanes, motorcycles, vehicle exhaust systems. We've been receiving more complaints on fireworks as well. And part of it's difficult for us to enforce because a lot of the noise or potential noise violations are temporary or transient. So it's very, very hard for the police or city staff to investigate them. Another thing is our ordinance is not necessarily clear. As you'll see today, we have some residents talk a little bit for a few minutes about the church bells, but it says church bells are exempt. It doesn't say whether those church bells can be electronic recordings of church bells or if they have to be played at churches or they can be played elsewhere. So in my mind, I think we need to look at our noise ordinance more comprehensively to see if it says what we want to say, if the exemptions are what we want them to be, if the decibel levels are what we want them to be. And you'll see in my memo that I suggest forming a noise committee, a noise control committee comprised of staff as well as residents to take a good look at some of the issues that are happening with noise in town, as well as to re-examine the ordinance to make sure it says what we want to say and then to make recommendations to council. But I know Tom Sheldon here he's a downtown resident who last year, along with others, had concerns about downtown noises, including the church bells, and he's going to talk for a few minutes about that. And I asked council to open it up to the public to get comments after Tom does his presentation, and then to discuss whether forming some sort of committee or even just a staff review of the noise ordinance is something that council wants to do. So Tom, I know you're in the audience here. If you want to come to the front of the room. And then you can please direct the comments to the council.
Yeah. Exhibition documents, should I give them to you?
Yeah, give it to me and I'll pass it.
Okay. Thanks. Well, I had a fancy presentation put together, and then I had a very difficult interaction with the neighbor this afternoon. He came across the street and said to me, I know what you're trying to do to the bells, and I can't be a good neighbor to you if you try to get the Angelus bells eliminated. So it made me rethink my entire presentation and my focus. And what I want to focus on is facts, ordinances, and clarity. My neighbor didn't realize that the Angelus bells had 24 bells after the 9 that went up to 90 dB, which is 4 times the city ordinance for noise. My neighbor debated that the bells played until 11 p.m. last year. And I said, I have a document that I'm sharing that came from the church that said we play the bells until 11 p.m. My neighbor argued that the bells are the bells, and well, the electronic music is different, but the bells are the bells, and you can't control the bells. Well, I don't take any delight in spending my time on this, but I did research the company that installed the digital bell controller, electronic striker, and the chain drive mechanism that attaches to the wheel of the bell that controls the noise velocity of the bell. My one conversation with the father said, it's impossible to change the noise of the bell. And why would I? It's too important to me. Well, the company that installed the bell said, sure, you've got either a striker outside or inside, you've got a swinging motor, you have clapper springs that can set the strike, reduce the noise, and you can slow down the motor. So you can modify the noise of the bell. You can modify the velocity of the bell. So that's one concern that I would like the committee that wants to study noise to focus on. And the other piece is the music that the church plays. Now, I suggested a year ago that the music the church plays should be controlled by the noise ordinance, just like the new music I play from my house. I'm a neighbor of the church. The church is a neighbor of mine. I don't play my music louder than 70 dB. And the church music shouldn't be louder than 70 dB. The other piece I handed out was Father's statement after I attempted to negotiate with him, Chief Knight attempted to negotiate with him, and City Council attempted to negotiate with him. And one of his statements was, I agree to follow the city ordinance on the electronic music from here on out. And I also agree to stop at 10 o'clock rather than 11 o'clock. Well, from my personal perspective, I don't think the music has decreased. I don't think it's at 70 dB. And all I have to go with is kind of circumstantial information. I asked the police chief to come out to my house and measure, sorry, Victor, could we go to the sound? Right. One more up, I think. No, it would be what is equivalent to 70 dB. Yeah, so a vacuum cleaner is equivalent to 70 dB. Not to be a wise guy, but I wanted some verification. I asked the police to come out and measure my vacuum cleaner, which is a Shark vacuum cleaner. I had a reading of 70 dB. The officer that came had a reading of slightly higher, 76 dB. We walked outside. We got halfway to the curb. He said, I don't think I can hear it anymore. When we got to the curb of my house, front door open, he said, I can't hear it anymore. So to me, that was a validation that 70 dB, you probably can't hear from the perimeter of your property. Yet I hear every song 15 times a day from 3 blocks away. If we can flip to another slide. This is the police report describing that. If we can go to the sound system, one with 4 speakers. There are 3 major players in creating artificial bells in the country. They all happen to be in Ohio: Chimemaster, Verdun, and McShane Bells. This is how they set their system up. They're 4 loudspeakers with long throw. A church can save a lot of costs. The system costs about $12,000 without maintaining the bells. By simply having this system, they can choose, for example, the Westminster chime. That is a chime that we hear every hour on the hour, 4 rings before the hourly bell. They can choose that program, and they can choose the bell ringing on the hour right after that program. They also have over 1,000 songs they can choose from to have a complete presentation with chimes, hourly rings, and music afterwards. I suggest that this electronic music is not protected by the exclusion of church bells. I would say this is not church bells. In fact, I'm really not sure now what is a church bell and what is not a church bell. About 10 o'clock in the morning, there is an overlap where the music cuts in before the hourly ring hits 10. So again, there's some confusion with the system. I would suggest that first step would be the music should be considered music and limited to 70 dB. And then the investigation of what is really a bell or what is a electronic bell controller that's done with a digital software interface. I don't think the people who created the ordinances in the 1930s could ever imagine that we could, even on our smartphone, control volume, speed, intensity of a church bell when they chose to exclude church bells from a noise ordinance. Going back to my neighbor, I was very concerned when she said, why do you want to eliminate the Angelus bells? Why does that matter to you? And I said, well, I know the Angelus bells, and this is going back a year ago when I said, all of this is very significant, has intense history, and I want to respect and be careful of that. Nowhere could I find that the Angelus bells represent three strikes of three. And by the way, the piece I handed out, the church document thought the Angelus bells, someone who wrote that piece up said, well, the Angelus bells are four bells. Angelus bells by definition are three sets of three. But nowhere could I find the 24 bell strikes after that were part of the Angelus bells. Increasing in value, increasing in volume, and going over 4 times the city ordinance at over 91 dB. The only thing I could figure is it is a reminder that Christ died on the cross at age 33, 9 and 24, 33. And we're reminded of that 6 a.m., 12 noon, and 6 p.m.
Thank you, Tom.
So we're gonna go straight to public comment, so. Anyone have Melissa? who's next?
I'm on Fourth Street.
Hi, I'm Melissa Harrison. I used to live on 4th Street. And when I lived there, Jill, maybe you can clarify this. I don't remember any Angelus bells at all. I just remember the morning matins, I think it's called, and then the vespers, whatever they call it, in the evening, and that was it. So this must be I mean, we haven't been down there in 20 years, but I wonder when this started.
I don't know, it is annoying though.
It's annoying to you?
Well, we should address the council and that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, we'll get other
Yeah.
comments.
So that's about it. I mean, the morning ones, you get used to it, you sleep right through it. Evening one, I don't really recall it that well. None of it was really very annoying back then, but I think this would be incredibly annoying in the neighborhood. And the fact that it wasn't done not that long ago, to me, sounds like it's not a necessary thing to do. That's it.
Sir.
I'm Dave Hosey from 598 East Main. Just a quick question. Victor, you mentioned earlier on the subject of noise, if it's a temporary thing, it's hard to catch it,
Certainly.
some of those lines.
Yeah.
I hear your frustrations on the church bells. I have a similar frustration on the noise on Main Street. That has been talked about, it's been experienced for 40 years, okay? And nothing's ever done. And so what happens, you know, you listen to the motorcycles, it's like an echo chamber going down Main Street. Bikes can be rode silently or quietly, I should say quietly. Just look at Daytona Bike Week. Those guys know how to maintain their bikes and run them quietly. What about the vehicles, okay, where the muffler systems are not existent? Okay, it's temporary, Victor. Does that mean I have to live with it? I wouldn't think so. And all I do is I encourage anybody, okay, to come sit on my front porch between 7:30 and 9 and 4 and 5:30. And I'll guarantee you, 1 seat away, you won't be able to hear me talk. And I got a pretty strong voice. So I hear what you're saying. It's a total Harbor Springs issue for noise. It's got to be under control. Not just church bells, but noise in general. And I'm sure you guys that live out in the side streets, hear occasional ones going down your street too. You go, oh my God. Okay, so we all frustrated by it, but yet we do nothing with it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Betsy Saul from 7 Woods Drive, and I'm really just came to the city council meeting, and I'm very shocked because I do enjoy the church bells. I think it's part of Harbor Springs. I think there is a beauty here. There's a peace here. I do yoga on Monday and Friday mornings. We absolutely love hearing music, but I live down the city. I used to live down in Weequahic, and I didn't get to hear the church bells. And I think it's a special gift to our city. Thank you.
Hi, Matt. My name is Jeff Gardner. I live on 3rd Street, and I've been here for 65 years. And I moved to 3rd Street about 6 years ago. I used to live in Weequahic. So when I grew up, the bells went off at 6 in the morning and at noon and 6 o'clock. That's Father Joe, ran the whole show. And I liked it. And I moved downtown, and Mrs. Buell gave me the information on the Angelus prayer. She said, now, Jeff, if you wake up at 6 o'clock, just make a prayer and go back. That's fine. So I did that. And at noon went off, which is great. And then 6 o'clock is great. But I live right across from the church, and I've been around lots of churches. I go to the Episcopal Church, and these bells have been going off 36 times a day. Okay, it starts at 6 a.m. It ends at 9 p.m. I don't mind the bells, but what I want is moderation. Instead of 3 bells, it's gone up to 36 times each hour. The bells go off, and then there's a little music behind it.
Jeff, could you direct it to council?
The council, okay. So the bottom line is, it's gone up 36 times. I think it's too much obnoxious. The bells are great, but just moderation. I think I said that before. So I like peace and quiet on my front porch too. And when I have a cocktail party, friends come by, everybody has to stop talking because the bells are so loud. Okay, that's at 6 or whatever. So anyway, I wake up at 6, 7, 8. Sometimes I sleep a little late, but I turn on the air conditioning because the bells go straight through my house and it's too loud. So that's the end of the story. So we only had 3 bells for the last 60 years. And a new priest came up here and wants to turn on the bells 36 times a day. I think it's obnoxious. So that's what I'm saying. I don't mind the bells as long as it's moderation. 36 times a day is overdone. Okay. I think I made my point.
Father James Beers, 150 West Main Street. I'm the one with the bells. The Angelus bells that ring at 6 a.m., noon, and at 6 p.m., I guess have been ringing, my understanding, for over 100 years. Without the motor as well. I have a custodian who was a young boy who rang the bells with one of the brother Franciscans in that particular order back some, as he remembers it, around 70 years ago. He rang them by hand. So the motors have been obviously introduced, but the bell numbers have been the same as they were when he was a little boy ringing those bells. As to the electronic bells, they have been there since the 1970s. I'm not sure how my past predecessors, various priests have used them, but I know they have been rung. And I have fixed them and have rang them on the hour with chimes that go with it. Yeah, they are electronic. I have been working with Chief Kyle Knight as well on that particular issue. And I am willing to continue work with Chief Kyle Knight on that issue. But as to the real bells, They've been ringing there before a neighborhood even was existed in there. And now a neighborhood has grown around Holy Childhood of Jesus since then. And so I'm assuming the rings that are currently there are from the Franciscan friars when they came here over 100 years ago and began ringing those bells the way they had been rung. They have a great devotion to our Blessed Mother. And so the Angelus is the angel Gabriel's announcement to Mary of the incarnation, that mystery that Catholics, I think Christians as a whole, would be celebrating. I think that's all I want to say right now. As it is right now, the hard bells, real bells will continue to ring. I'm not sure how negotiable those would be, since I think they were there before the ordinance has already been expressed and grandfathered clause in, and part of a Catholic, I think, right to express the Catholic faith in this area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ann O'Brien, 565 East Main Street. I think we have to be really careful. You're talking about the bells and people, don't like the bells, and then, okay, so we take that, lower that, take that away. Then what about the whistle? At the noon and 6 o'clock, maybe somebody's baby sleeping and they raise their hand. You got to shut that down. So that goes away. And all the little things that make our city kind of different and special is going away, except for motorcycles with the music going down the street, because we can't, stop them because they're temporary, they're in and out. And it's hard. So you have to have a little tolerance, a little give and take, and hopefully the good sounds will override, not so motorcycle sounds. We can work on those instead. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Julie?
I'm Julie Bacon. I live on Main Street, and I have to tell you that I'm delighted when the 6 o'clock bells wake me up. But this discussion reminds me a little bit of, I had a home in France for 16 years in the Dordogne Valley, in a very small home in the town of St. Cyprian. And next to me, 11 kilometers away, was the town of Lviv, where all of the newcomers, mostly Brits, they didn't want those goddamn bells playing all the time. And so they actually stopped the bells. And I have to tell you that in my town, they told them, no, the bells are going to ring. The bells have been ringing for hundreds of years, and they're going to ring. And if you don't like it, buy a house that's not close to the church. And so I'm happy to keep the bells. I think in that Angelus tune, is that the one that goes on for dongs more than 100 times?
Yes.
Because I've counted them in France, and it's more than 100. But it's beautiful. So I support the bells.
One of you ladies.
I'm Josie O'Brien. I'm at 4985 Russell Road. And I'm just here to say that when I go to Dudley's Deck, I could be very easily offended by the horn of the pointer, the boat coming in. It always feels to me like they toot the horn on the way in, but I'm not offended. It's a sound that is the sound of Harbor Springs, and I know it. When I sit at the paper station out at the patio, I sit there and I order at 11:58 in the morning, and at noon there's this siren and an air horn, and I'm startled, and my guests are startled. I could be offended, but I know it's the sound of Harbor Springs. When I'm sitting back at the paper station out on the patio, and I hear a police siren and a police car go slowly down Main Street, honking its horn, and a fire truck behind with sirens, and a school bus behind it with girls' basketball winners, and they're all honking. It's a joyful noise. And when I hear the bells, that is a joyful sound. So I simply am here to say that if someone feels offended that maybe the Christmas lights are on a little too bright, or maybe that we need to salt down some ice rinks because people are skating too fast, please do consider that there's a way for us to be forward, but that these are the sounds, these sensational, traditional sounds of Harbor Springs. And I am saying, please keep them. I'm here to read a letter from a city resident named Rochelle Clark, and her address is 253 West 4th Street in Harbor Springs. She says, Rochelle Clark, I reside at 253 West 4th Street in Harbor Springs. I have been a citizen and permanent resident at this address in Harbor Springs for 45 years. My house is closer to Holy Childhood Church than the house at 258 West 4th Street. In the summer, I enjoy spending time on my deck, which is at the back of my house on the church side. Whether inside my house, on the deck, in my yard, I do not find the bells of Holy Childhood to be loud, nor do I find them to be annoying. In fact, I love to hear the bells ring. I have enjoyed the bells for 45 years at this location. The bells have religious significance, but they are also part of the beauty and charm of Harbor Springs. I strongly support continued bell ringing. I'm out of town tonight and unable to attend the meeting. I want to make it clear that I recognize and support the rights of Holy Childhood to ring its bells. I recognize and support the religious freedoms guaranteed to the citizens of this country and this state. And as a voter, I do not support wasting tax dollars or wasting the time of elected officials and taxpayers to review the noise ordinance in order to discriminate against the Catholic Church. Sincerely, Rochelle Clark. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Christine Peralt. I live at 4983 Fisher Road. However, I used to live at 601 2nd Street. And the bells just represented to me, first of all, you get used to it. You get used to the sound. I heard them all the time. And what they signified to me was a time of, yes, I am a Catholic, but it also reflected to me in times of prayer, times of reflection, but it also gave an essence to what Harbor Springs is about. This is a really super unique town, and it comes with a history, which is the church bells are part of that history. And I appreciate people coming into this community, wanting to make their homes here, but to change things up when somebody's already been here for many years, hundreds of years, these bells have been, I would probably ask them to reconsider where they live and to really explore what the town is all about. And maybe, you know, if it's not what they want, then there are other paradises in the United States. But this is a really unique town, and I'm in support of the bells.
Anyone else? Very good. Anyone at the table wanna talk about the bells?
I'll get it, Matt.
The discussion is about bells, and I think we're mixing two distinct issues. One is the bells that have been here for, I don't know how long, 100 years. And I have, I've talked to a lot of people about this. They've come to me or I've asked them, and I've never heard anyone complain about the Angelus bells. I've heard a lot of concern about lumping the Angelus bells along with the music, which I've talked with people who don't necessarily like the duration or the volume, but those are two separate issues. One is exempt in the current ordinance, and again, no one's complained about it. We're focusing on bells. I like the idea of expanding it into review of the noise ordinance. I mean, there's more, we've heard it here, there's more concern about noise than just bells. And getting a group of people together that represent the stakeholders in the town, to me, I don't think it's a waste of time. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, and part of that can be to address the issue of music and enforceability of other types of noise within the city, something that we can't do here. So I would like to support Victor's proposal to put together a committee to look into it.
I agree. I think that'd be a good idea.
Things have changed since whenever it was written, 1930 or whenever it was, things have definitely changed.
And I think we need to look at, like John said, all the noise, because it is very noisy. I live across the street here, so it's very noisy, and I think there are things we can do about all the noises. I don't think we can fix everything, but I do think we can address a lot of the different noise issues. And the church bells are part of that, and the music. And again, I agree with you. We're talking about several different things, several different music, bells, things coming from the church. So I think I'm in support of putting a committee together to take a look at the whole ordinance and see what we can do. We're gonna have to compromise. I mean, it's pretty obvious that we're gonna have to compromise. And I think that's a good way to do that, is to get input from a committee of people.
We have 2 volunteers.
Right.
Nice speak.
Sure, why not?
Rebecca Backus, 500 West Summit. I just want to say this, you put together this ad hoc meeting on sound. Audio sound is a unique engineering discipline. To have a bunch of amateurs with, meters is not the way to do it. It's just my 2 cents. I come from that field, so I know.
Yeah, come in.
Yeah.
Our 3rd volunteer. All right, well, sounds like-
Well, the committee that I propose is just a proposal, would include the city manager, police chief, city attorney, council member, and 3 members of the public. So I think what we could do is put out applications, or have people apply, and then at the next council meeting, September 19th, council can choose 3 members of the public to serve on the committee and 1 amongst yourself.
Sounds good to me. Sounds like the right balance, of people that have a stake in this.
Kyle, real quick, correct me if I'm wrong, we can't really police the sound or do much with Main Street and 119, correct? Because that's
We can,
considered as
we can cite, and as I was sitting here thinking about the discussion, especially Dave, about the motorcycles. I'm like, one thing that I was thinking we could put up on the east side and on the west side, maybe, please respect our neighborhoods or something like that, just a reminder of the motorcycles. We can break the citations. It's just a matter of catching them and enforcing it as they're going through. And it's gonna ramp up in the next 2 or 3 months.
Hey Kyle, one thing you did down in Daytona, the bike people, they were everywhere. Simple signs, we love bikers, please ride quietly. It's amazing what happened when those signs went up.
That's what I was thinking we could do on our limits. Maybe that's actually what I was thinking we could do on both limits, because we're gonna get a lot of bikes. And it might help, just make them respect their.
several big rides coming up, so there's gonna be hundreds of bikes
Absolutely,
coming through. And I have one now, so I get it.
So that's
So you
something that
can't vote.
we could, just because it's a state highway, we can enforce the law.
Right.
But it becomes an enforcement challenge.
Oh, yeah. You get 10 motorcycles going through, which one are we gonna pick?
But if this approach has been proven to work, let's try it.
I think we should
Oh,
try
yeah.
it. This is pretty bad on this corner, as you all know.
We have a hand raised on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Margaret's iPad.
Margaret.
So Chief, on the motorcycles, what I've noticed is the music that is going along with the motorcycles. Can that be is that like part of the quiet signs?
Yes, we can, we'll come up with something, but
I think when we do the committee, we'll.
no, I agree.
All right, you're up, Maggie.
Okay, sorry about that. You know, the one thing that we all have to recognize is that we do live by the harbor, which naturally carries sound. And so to be realistic and really try to manage the sound can be impossible. And I agree with whoever spoke that says this has to be someone that really understands sound and acoustics, because you can have a party across on the point and we hear it all the way up on the bluff.
Yes.
And that's just the town. So to think that we're going to be able to control all the sounds throughout this town is so unrealistic. I'm just want to put that on the record. I mean, this is just so unrealistic that we're wasting our time on this.
Don't agree. Don't agree.
Thank you.
There's no other public comment. I think a motion to committee, and then I'll come back. I'll advertise for the public.
I would make that motion.
I'm second.
Well, it was a motion that went down relative.
To establish the committee as proposed by the city manager.
Yeah, to form the committee.
Okay. Motion to form a committee. Al Dika.
Yes.
John Cox.
Yes.
Matt Bulgara.
No.
John Leo.
Yes.
And these are Adele, yes. Carried.
All right, item 3C, substation location review. At our last meeting, council tabled the discussion on the location for the substation to this meeting. And as you know, the existing proposed location was on a wooded city parcel on East Lake Street, where it turns into Park Street, basically, in between, near the soccer fields and near across the street from the baseball field. We as a staff, as a reminder, we had looked at two other sites. One was the old reservoir site, Pete's Run, which is on Hoyt, corner of Pete's Run and Hoyt Road. And then we also looked at the wetlandish area just to the east of the Deer Park. Based on those three sites that we looked at, we determined that the site, the wooded parcel, was the most feasible. However, through the last meeting and discussions from council, there was ideas to look at other potential city parcels. And I included some of those as well. There was also some talk about looking at potential private properties that there might be options as well. And of course, those all come with their different complications and different paths to getting those to come to be, right? You know, private parcels, you would need to buy property or get easements. And for some of those private parcels are really close to our main line, so you would reduce costs for reaching that main line. However, you know, some public properties, they might need longer lines, but they may be further away from residential areas. We had a resident submit an idea to produce a matrix of the analysis matrix of the different sites to bring to council, as well as potentially form a committee. It's not my intention to put more work on me with another committee, but just offering that to council as a potential, or staff can just look at all the sites that council might have in mind, which council said they would discuss tonight, and then staff can look at those sites with our engineer and then bring back to council a more detailed analysis of those other sites. So I've included, as I mentioned, some of the potential sites. One last time was discussed was the Deer Park, and the idea was if we could place the substation at the Deer Park and shift the Deer Park south. We have to keep in mind that the Deer Park, in order to keep the same number of deer in that Deer Park, we'd have to keep the Deer Park the same size. If we want to reduce the Deer Park size, then you'd have to take out some deer. So based on some general, it could fit, basically. It could fit there, and it's a good option. We looked at this parcel to the east. That is a wetland area, and we don't even know if, aside from the physical challenges, we don't even know if the state would let us do that because it's a wetland area. But we don't know that. We'd have to investigate that further. So that could be one complication. Another option some had mentioned is Kiwanis Park. Kiwanis Park, while it could be an option, there's a lot of drawbacks to Kiwanis Park. One is it's a public park and it's likely restricted to park purposes. Second is the line would have to go all the way down to Lake Street, so the expenses to build that line would be tremendous. However, it is further away. Some people have proposed that the wooded lot we were originally looking at, was a bad site because, of course, one, for the trees, but the second reason was because it's near recreational area as well. And just like the Deer Park location, Kiwanis Park is also near a recreation area. So it doesn't have as many benefits as we think. But however, if council wants us to try to look into that, we can look into that one as well. And then finally, this right here on the west side of Hoyt Street, that's the reservoir site, old reservoir site that's on Pete's Run and Hoyt. We looked at that site before. It's kind of small, kind of hilly. It just, the costs were would be a little more. However, it's not impossible, but it's not the ideal site that we looked at. These other ones are private properties that if council was interested in approaching them for an easement or to buy. The reason why we looked at them is right here, you see this line that cuts through the properties. That is our main transmission line. And so you would reduce costs by locating it right there. You would obviously have to have more costs with purchasing property and easement. And some of these even have, obviously, this parcel right here is all wooded. So, you'd have running the same issue of taking down trees. However, it was an option suggested why we don't look at some private properties as well, purchase some other properties outside of the center. They are residential areas, so that is a concern as well. Other locations that are further out the city or further out from this Hoyt Road to Main Street pose a problem because the further you go out from the center of the load, the further the loss you have, the reliability, as well as the increased costs for the further you out from the city. So the whole point of having the second substation was to locate it near the center of our grid. And unfortunately, center of our grid, there's residential, there's community, there's parks, there's a lot of things there. So, but this has been our recommendations from our engineers to relocate it back to the center of the system since 2006. So the first 2006 study was recommended, and it's recommended again now. So, but those are some of the locations that we had in mind as staff, and we also heard from residents of the council, and there's other locations council wants staff to look at. We can look at those as well.
If we chose to analyze the Pete's Run location as one possible source, would we need new easements to get the main line over?
We do right now have an easement, I believe, to access the line from this property. I'm not sure about I'd have to analyze that question for the new easement. My one concern with this Pete's Run site is it is in a subdivision, beginning of a subdivision, it's all residential. It'll be closer to any house than any other proposed substation locations. It's actually would be right next to a house here and right across the street from a house. So.
Okay, thanks.
Were there any spots up by the DPW that would work?
Not at the DPW, no. Some people had mentioned Franklin Park, and I don't know. But then we run into the same issue of you got to get the line to Hoyt or Main Street.
And there's no lots open in Franklin Park.
No, unless we try to purchase something.
Well, talk about cost, purchasing anything to locate the station is just going to drive the cost way up.
Base of the hill on Arbor Street and the Deer Park seem like the two viable options. Cost wise.
Which two were those?
Deer Park down here, somewhere out here or down at the base of the hill going up to Kiwanis. The city property to the left there past the practice field.
And that one might have park restrictions on it, so that's.
Park restrictions as in that was deeded with the restriction that can only be used as a park.
Yeah, there may be restrictions that only can be used in park, so unless we go through some discussions, but that would take a lot longer and wouldn't be a guaranteed outcome. that Kiwanis Park was originally Kansas City's in 1985, I believe. And yeah, so just FYI.
Down here. The beach on, those are the only two options. Besides,
Which did you say the only two options?
are the deer down here by the deer park or at, on White Street, up by the old reservoir. Cost effective and center of the load.
Okay.
But we also have the original option too.
That's or the original option.
The one at Pete's Run is really close to a house.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, that was one of the concerns was
Right.
to try and not put it next to the residential.
Is the lot that you said you were looking at the east, is that the parcel that the trees have all been cut already on? Because it looks like it's over, it looks like it's right part of the parking lot almost, but it's not paved.
Right here.
There's no trees on it,
I think it's the original location where the school accidentally cut down the trees.
Is that available? Because there's no trees on it and it can be hooked into the lines that are already here. And we really don't need extra parking because there's tons of wonderful new parking.
I'm not quite sure which.
I think she's speaking about if you go past our police department on the right, where they cut the trees recently, is that gravel lot where they park for the
Yes.
football games.
Yeah, and we
Yes.
have all this wonderful parking up at the sports center and
That's-
here.
Yes.
So that part you're looking at right here above this red line, it's too small. It would have to expand into this wetland area. So that's something that we don't know if we would even be able to get a permit for, so.
Well, and there've been a lot of opinions through these discussions. If you don't want it to be visible as you drive into and out of town, that's not the place to put it.
You can't see it coming into town unless you crank the head completely
That'd
around.
be a great image of Harbor Springs, walk right down the hill and see the electrical station. Right. Holy smokes.
Well, I mean.
It was here long before
Mayor,
us.
I'd say we should either finish this discussion here or open it up to public comment, so it's not a debate back and forth.
We're gonna hold off on public comment. We're gonna talk some more. I guess, you better start looking for more options.
Well, we can't afford to spend another $5-6 million to buy property and run lines. So I mean, we got two options. Our first option, or look at the option, put it down here.
Does, Bill Dome have any property that we could work a deal with? Do you
I've
think?
heard, I can ask.
Along the line, there would have to be a line.
It'd have to be, I don't think the township has property along that line, at least toward the center of the load. Those were all private parcels. Further out, sure.
The center of the load is here.
Right. Yeah, because you gotta go to the brewery basically, and out to the Ridge Road. So right, this is the middle.
This is it.
I think something that might be helpful is to see a drawing or a picture of what it would look like, because I think we're basing it on old time 40 years ago when we talk about what was down here. And I know some of you have been in on this, but there's one in Travers that's inside a brick building. You don't even realize it's a substation. I don't know the cost of that, and we talked a little about it last time, but I think one of the hesitations for a lot of folks down here is the way it would look. Because in a lot of ways down here makes sense. It's the center of the load, it's where the lines are. I don't think any of us want to see, huge towers and antennas, but I don't think that's what we're talking about nowadays at all. And I'd love to see something that would help all of us to know what it would look like if we can do that.
Excuse me, I live at the corner of White and Pine, and is
Ma'am,
is this going to be comparable?
ma'am, it's
I'm sorry.
not time for the public to speak
Oh,
right
I'm
now.
sorry, I didn't hear you say that.
All right, you'll get your chance.
Okay.
I mean, it would be, if it could look like these brick buildings that are sitting here and was tucked back there, I don't think that would be offensive to people.
No.
I don't think it would.
Or if it could be shielded with greenery, with evergreens, something
what
like that.
An option is.
And wherever it's, I mean, it would just be a projection of what the heights and widths, how it would look like with either greenery or building or a shell around it.
A shell around it, even without.
It shouldn't be a lot of work to do.
I wonder are the wires going in and out of this thing all up on high tension
No, they're-
poles?
they're
or are they buried or?
They would be buried coming to this main line on M119.
They're underground.
That was the original proposal last year that.
And then from here to distribute, is all of that buried too?
Yeah, underground, yeah.
It's buried until it gets to lines that may be above ground, but they're already there.
Yeah.
So the distribution lines may be above ground, but everything coming into and out of the substation would be underground.
Isn't that pretty much what they've been doing the last couple of years around town here, is upgrading?
Yeah, we dedicate like, I think, $25,000 yearly to burying primary lines on them underground. So it's something, so it wouldn't make sense for us to put these above ground and then 10 years later bury them. So we just initially bury them. So that was factored in the cost, initial estimate of $4.5 million for this project, was the burying of the lines wherever we put it. But a visual would help, and the visual was going to be planned for the planning commission meeting, but we can come back to the council with that. But I guess really, does council want an in-depth analysis before they see the photos of these parcels, or do you want to see what it could potentially look like before direct staff to make that in-depth analysis? Because an in-depth analysis, the more in-depth we go, it's gonna cost more money. Now, that might be a worthwhile front investment in the front, or it might not be.
Well, regardless of where, like what site, I mean, they should be able to just do a 3D version.
Right, but if you want one that looks like in a brick building versus one that's screened by shrubbery, right? You know, because there'd be two different, if they're at two different locations, I imagine you'd want the one here that looks more like a brick building versus one that's in that wooded lot that's more screened, but that's just a assumption.
Michael probably has the engineer probably has a picture of the one in Traverse City. And I understand we wouldn't look just like that, but it's in a brick building. It would give us a pretty good idea, I would think, of what we could do down here. Because I think this is a site we should consider. I think this is one of the ones that we should
Or
consider.
even if he has pictures of a existing site somewhere that's similar to what we got going on.
Even some of those up right now.
I was gonna say that. Because we do have to be mindful of costs. We have to be, and this is the center of the load. Somewhere within a not too big a circle from here is the center. So I don't think it really makes a lot of sense to look way outside of that. It's just not the responsible thing to do.
Well, if the spider web of lines is not visible, you know, to us driving or walking or riding bikes, then my objection to having it down here goes away. I think that this would probably be the best thing. I don't think it should be up where the old reservoir site is.
We just close down to the neighbors again.
Understandably, if it's right next door.
Right
to
next
our
door to
house,
our house.
yeah, that's not a good thing.
All right, we'll see if you can get some pictures of substations from our engineer. And different ways to hide it. And I guess look at. Yeah, just do that.
And if you get those, you know, in 1 week or 2 weeks, could you send them out to us rather than wait to pile it all on to the next council agenda?
And the next council meeting is in a month, so.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree. Let's see it as soon as they have it.
And he should be able to come up with something.
Yeah, he's worked on several projects.
He's gotta have something in his portfolio that's close.
Okay.
Is it a big deal to find out if
Look
the
out.
state would have an objection to the wetlands?
Go for it, Bill.
Couple of issues. Matt, you mentioned to,
That might be worth finding out.
I'm sorry. You mentioned to Victor about some guy with a lot. Rather than buying a lot, you can trade lots, trade property for lot.
We can't trade lots. The city, our charter says we have to auction off a lot and go to a vote for the people to auction off. a
We've
lot.
already done the vote. That vote was done years ago.
Okay.
We have the permission of the people to sell that lot.
Oh, which lot? I didn't, he said, I didn't know. if you
The reservoir lot.
Oh,
Oh,
You know, the other thing I just want to say, and I know it's been talked about, I read your agenda things. But put it down here, when you're coming down the hill, I think you touched on the last meeting. That's the image you want to present as Harbor Springs. You don't want to detract, but I'm gonna hold that off until I see a picture.
I was
of
gonna
what
say, I think
they're
we need
talking
to
about.
see what it.
But I don't agree with it over there at all. You and I are complete opposite of that one. Because if it goes there and it's ugly, okay, but we don't know. Our property values are going down, and then I'm gonna come after you guys. Okay, and that's wrong. We have all this property around Harbor Springs, we want to shoehorn it into a corner. Just something to think about. And now I know you've been around since Christ was a pup, okay? But frankly, from what I understand, that was news to me. It used to be here, we moved it out.
Yes.
Why reverse history?
Because moving it out didn't make sense. It took it from.
Well, then why did they move it out? Put it back there doesn't make sense either, Nancy. So, thank you.
So I think, I'll just clarify that the reason, just reminder for those that are here, the reason the city originally moved it out was two reasons. One was, as Alan mentioned, aesthetically, what we had then did not look good. But the second was they assumed that the growth of our load would happen east toward Clayton Road, and the growth did not happen east. So those are the two reasons.
If we had it in a contained building, would it require the same amount of acreage? Or do you need more when it's just fenced in?
It would probably require the same amount because you need to have, well, I would double check with the engineer with that. I'm assuming the same amount because it's roughly the same amount. I don't know what the driveway would look like to access.
Well, and the
the
other
site.
thing, and I know you were saying how people don't throw money at you, and I understand that, but this whole community is so geared, because of Little Traverse Conservancy and everything, it's so geared that if they have something to focus on, you can raise money and people will give you money and people will donate their time like they did when they built the firehouse, the playground behind Shea Elementary years ago. That was community built. And people donated their time, donated supplies, donated money. If there's something for the community to wrap themselves around, you can raise money for a building.
I was just gonna speak real quick that when we were at the initial meeting, like a long time ago, a year ago, when it came and proposed one that, or showed the one in Traverse City, I actually sit back here on Google Earth and looked at that building. It looks just like the AT&T building downtown from the outside, it's brick. So I think we just need to wait until we get some representation from him, because it was, you can walk by that building in Traverse City, by that building, and it looks just like the outside of the AT&T building down here that nobody realizes the AT&T building. So I think that's a good idea.
It's my understanding that that building is essentially vacant. There's just a little bit of a computerized switch here. It's my understanding that that building is essentially vacant. It used to be full of switch gear, but now that the phone companies changed, there's just some stuff in there.
I wasn't referenced to what's in the building. I was just saying the outside, the exterior of that building in Traverse City, as driven by it, looks just like that building.
Well, what I'm saying is, if it's gonna go in a building, maybe you could put it into that building.
Yeah, let's put it over. Really put it in the middle of residential. Put it on Third Street. All right, your turn.
Is the size of this similar to the one on Stutzmansville Road?
No,
Smaller.
Significantly.
Significantly smaller, because that was one of my concerns. That's pretty startling when you see the one out there. I was just wondering, so it's not, we don't have to worry about looking on something like that.
Something like that, but small.
The one on Stutzmansville
It's
Road.
roughly 70 feet by 100 feet. That's the footprint.
Oh.
Yes, sir, in the back.
I'm just thinking about.
Can you say your name?
Know what the height of this structure will
We
be?
need your name, address, please.
Pardon? Name and address. Mike Bartlett, I'm in Petoskey.
Right.
Do you know the height of this?
The lightning rod is 37 feet or so. The rest, the transformers were between 12 and 18 feet, I believe, or 20 feet, something like that. But the lightning rod is what's 37 feet.
37 feet.
Is the lightning rod.
I'm just wondering if you think outside the box a little bit. I had a nephew that traveled around the world building roller coasters. And there was a code in Europe, in England, that they couldn't have their roller coasters above ground. So they built them below grade. Have you considered that? Take this thing and drop it down 20 feet or 25 feet and have a smaller structure above. Just a thought.
Mr. Everest. I'm Chip Everest. I'm a permanent, full-time resident at Four Beach Drive, living in Harbor Springs. And my question is, if we, having a structure that's 37 feet high in an area, in a designated park area that we moved originally because of the aesthetics, why would we ever consider doing that again? Now, if we're talking about an enclosed building, that does change my mind, but having it without the building concept, I'm adamantly opposed to it. Being in this designated park area, dogs right here, is the first thing people see in and out, and people will see a 37-foot structure coming down the hill. I mean, I think it's ridiculous for you thinking about this area.
This might be a little bit off the wall, but having been a realtor in town for 40 years, I vaguely remember that nothing could be built on some of this property because the subsoil was sort of gelatinous in a way. It couldn't be built on, it wasn't stable enough. So you might have a few soil tests done before you totally pick out your spot.
Part of the process. Thank you. Karen?
In Stroud Valley, 644 Ann Street. I don't envy you guys. You're kind of between a rock and a hard place right here. I think it sounds to me that most of the objection is coming from people who don't want this in their backyards. They don't want it, they don't want to have to look at it. They don't want to hear the noise. And it seems to make most sense to kind of put it in a more public position, like down here, for example. If it worked down here, it sounds like the building idea surrounding it would be good. And the only thing sticking up would be the antenna, so that the structure itself, you said, is only about 12 or 15 feet. So it seems to me like using criteria, again, as chair of the parks or the tree board, I don't have anything to say about location, but I think whatever we can do to try to save trees and save the neighborhoods and keep our tree canopy, and then kind of keep it away from people's personal homes, like you said, Pete's Run, right next door to somebody's home. That's gonna see a big firestorm all over again. So, I guess I'm advocating something more in the public sphere, perhaps right here.
Question?
Yes, we did.
Ted Thomas, I live in Week, but I've been an officer or director of the Week-Wetancing Landowner Association the past 35 years. We have 25 properties in the city of Harbor Springs, even though that's only 25% of our association. So I think I'm speaking with concern of some of our Harbor Springs residents. I think you're a little premature, frankly, in this meeting, because nobody really knows exactly what is going to look like. I visited with Vincent earlier to try and figure out what I could find. And it was suggested that there is one of these substations up west of the Conway Road, along Clayton Road, which I went and looked at. It's not very attractive. It's got a fence around it. It's got electric power poles, and it wasn't in a building. Now, maybe because this is premature, we don't have a picture of what this is going to look like. But I know that there's been concern from our residents along Beach Drive in Harbor Springs about what this will look like. And also, it will change the ambience if it's like the one up there off of Clayton Road.
Please take off the unmute.
That's good.
We cut us off. We got cut off, Christie. I think it's conspiracy.
It is. Always perfect timing.
What? She did something for Teddy?
Oh.
Oh, they're reviewing it, it says. They should know an hour into it that they should do the changeover. It's all about this. Oh, they don't want us to hear.
Most cost effective spot to put.
But you're
So
gonna-
every foot away from that spot you go,
So
it
this
costs more
down here
money.
is not more cost effective?
No, it costs more money because you have to run the wire down here
Okay.
and then you have to run the wire back up there.
So I don't know what the exact cost would be until we do an analysis of that. So if we're comparing apples to apples, if it's just gonna be screening with vegetation, probably be, my guess is because less to place it here, but if we're talking about putting it in a building, talking about, making it even more screened in that sense, then it will increase the cost. So it all depends, Up there by Lake Street, you have to take down trees. So removing trees costs money. It doesn't cost money. There's not many trees to remove here. However, again, putting it in a building will then cost more money because up there wasn't a building proposed. So we haven't done that analysis yet. So I think we should hold off on making judgment of what it could and if it's gonna cost cheaper or more for the location. We don't know that yet.
Well, up there too, the trees are all aging out. And if you take down that triangular piece of property, plus all the trees along Lake Street there and by the sports park, they're all aging out. That whole canopy is gonna be gone. Everything's gonna be gone within the next probably decade.
Just keep in mind, the gentleman had the petition. There's a ball field here too. So let's not put our head in the sand. You got ball fields there, you got ball fields here. So which ball field wins, okay? I really think though, people's minds will be clean, clarified, like this gentleman here from Wiki said, when we get a picture of it, like Nancy suggested, I think John, you had suggested before yourself.
No, I'm just trying to place where he's at.
Yeah, they'll get you.
Can I ask one question, please?
Sure.
Pete Everest, I'm a fudgy at 6 Base Drive. How much noise do they put off any noise or?
Some, I'm not sure what the best tool is.
So they,
Well, we have
the
Quiet, please. Hey.
So I'll
Please be quiet.
answer that question is our engineer. Our engineer said that it'd be up to 70 decibels and it wouldn't be constant. It would be occasionally, so.
Under peak load, when it needs to cool and fans come on, it would be 70 dB. So we're back to like vacuum cleaner.
Back to church bells.
I'm Wendy Furchy and I live at 272080 Slate Road. And I have a question. You mentioned in the last meeting and referred to it tonight that, originally the thought was that Harbor Springs would grow out toward Clayton Road in the township. And then you said in the last meeting, of course, that it has grown in West Traverse Township. So my question is, where, you're talking about the center of the load. And I don't know if you could clarify at some point, not necessarily tonight, what exactly does that mean? Does it mean something that has to do with the poles and the wires, or is it actually use?
Use.
It is use, because if the growth is gone to the west and to the north.
That's not what was said. I think the growth has not migrated east. It has stayed and expanded here in the center. of the
Right,
city.
and,
So,
but it's full here, so further growth will have to go that way. Unless for some reason it starts going east, but it doesn't seem to be. And I just had a question about that. I want to also thank you for considering other options and taking the time to study it. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Well, I just also want to remind that out there on Lake Street, Lorraine White on Lake Street, is our city gateway. And I mean, we're talking about.
This is our city gateway also.
I understand, but that would have probably require a building also. I mean, you wouldn't want that at your gateway. Plus there are residents and we're just,
It sounds like what we really need is the imagery of what it's gonna look like, either greenery or building. And then we can have this discussion.
Okay, okay. That's it, no decision.
Let's move on.
So I'm sorry about that. We lost internet connection here, so we lost Zoom for a while. So for those that are on Zoom, apologize there, but we are back on. But I don't think it's gonna get on YouTube right now, so. We'll move on.
Okay.
Capital improvements plan review. So last year when we went through budget season, I think Councilmember Dyke and Councilmember Cupp said it would be a good idea for council to start looking at some of the capital improvements projects much earlier than when we were doing it in November. So our typical process. So as a reminder, we started doing capital improvements plan in 2019. The process that we set up then was we would staff reviews the projects starting in September. And we have a committee in October that reviews and ranks and scores of projects. And then we present the CIP to council in November, and then they approve it or make changes to it during the budget season and second and third week of summer. However, based on the amount of projects, the amount of activity going in this city, council wanted to have just an earlier peek at the CIP and throw out suggestions of what might be better to focus on sooner, what might be better to hold off. So I'm just throwing out our capital improvements, just a list of the projects that we had from last year's CIP. And in this document, I've outlined highlighted the 2022 projects and just made notes on what fund they came from, or sorry, if they came from the general fund, and if they're in process, if they're not started, if they've been completed, or if they've been pushed off. So for example, the chiller at City Hall, which actually failed this morning, we got to work, but that's on plan to be replaced this year. We're looking at some rebates from our energy efficiency, Franklin Energy. So we're hoping we can get that in September. It was ordered in June, or still to come here. But anyway, so that is in process. So it hasn't been completed yet, but it is in process. So again, I throw that out there. So if there's any projects that, council wants to mull over or just wants to give some direction, to staff as far as when we start compiling our projects, because this CIP is 6 years out. So what we do is just try to get a rough idea of what projects we need based on what fund, and we separate projects by priority, right? Some projects are low priority, some are high priority, some we say that it'll be with general fund or electric or water dollars, some will say it's all grant fund, so, or all donations. So there's a lot of factors that go into this when staff does a review and when the committee does a review. This is not set in stone, this is not the budget, so just because it's in the capital improvements plan does not mean it's part of the budget. What it means is that we're trying to plan for the infrastructure improvements and upgrades that we need for the next 6 years. It's a work in progress, so let's, I guess, get the ball rolling right now, so that way when I go to my staff, my department heads in September, I can give them some clear direction on how to proceed.
Do you have this in Excel?
I may.
We could move things around a little easier.
Yeah.
And I think a factor that has to come to bear that we haven't had in the past, or we haven't overtly considered, is what funds will be available to do some of these projects.
We don't know.
We don't
We
know,
don't know.
but it's something as we look at the list and consider what we want to do when in the short term, not knowing what our revenue level will be or where the revenue is going to come from. We need to keep that in mind. So are you looking for feedback tonight, or are you just looking for feedback? 'Cause I'm
Feedback
kind
and-
of with Al, if you could distribute this in a usable format like Excel at home with some quiet, we can take a look at it, try to figure out where things might land.
I think we need to be really cautious of anything coming from the general fund until we know what happens with the millage. Because that's really what's gonna determine the funds, the ones that come from general fund. Even if they were planned for 22 and haven't been started, I think we need to be very cautious.
Group 22, 23 are gonna be critical.
So Nick, are we on pace right now as far as projects and things we've been looking at?
A lot of the budget stuff that was in the CIP for 2022 from the general fund has been pushed off.
So things that have been pushed off so far or have not been pursued yet, for example, for the police department, we had tasers and uniforms. I know Chief Knight is looking at tasers and is willing, I think, to push off uniforms if need be.
Yes, but
No, I'll just finish really quick here. And then other things that were in there were de-digitization, so digitizing our deeds, our documents from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Sometimes staff spends a lot of time going through boxes to look for this information. There's one here that I put was general fund, but it's only partly general fund, and that's tree removal. That is something, those are the hazardous trees. So this would probably mostly be from electric fund, but we put it in general fund possibly because if those trees fall, those tall pine trees on the electric lines, they could also fall on our recreation skate park facility there. So tree trimming is one of the, tree removal is one of those things. We also did get a notice though, and I'll be going with DPW Director Lucas Vanderzee. DTE is willing to donate 20 trees for us to replant 20 new trees that would not be tall growing trees in that location. So we would get 20 trees as a way. So I mean, but we still have to spend the cost to remove the trees. And the primary reason we're removing these trees is they interfere with the electric lines. But it is also a partly general fund cost. Things that like the skate park remodel, that is a fundraising, so there's no general fund money going there. So that's all based on donations. There was a lot that we have in water and electric here. Some of the electric, for example, M119 Short Drive Phase 3, we pushed that off because we need, after conversations with the state, they wouldn't let us locate the line on the south side of M119. So we're now working with our attorneys, working to get easements and permission to put it on property on the north side of, or I guess if you're going up that way, the east side of M119. So yeah, Kyle, sorry, I know you were talking about the tasers and the uniforms.
Okay.
For sure.
But the only thing I was gonna say is that, like, I spoke with Victor about that there's wants and needs, the uniforms was a want and the tasers are a need. So that's why I spoke with Victor that we're holding off on the uniforms just to see.
So we are, when it comes to capital improvements projects, so, from the general fund, yes, probably aren't gonna spend as much, because even we had anticipated $56,000 for the chiller. We may get a rebate for that, and it's probably coming at a lower cost, so we might save $15,000 to $20,000 on that. But then you also, again, have an expected or unplanned for retirement of a long-serving police officer, which will, outweigh the savings we made on the capital improvements plan that we're not pursuing. I mean, we're just delaying these projects. We're not, they have to be done. For example, like our chiller broke down this morning and it's supposed to come in June. And that's fine. We can tolerate, stuffy conditions here at City Hall, but
Okay, we're headed for winter.
yeah. So I can get an Excel, a workable.
If you send it out, then we can provide you with feedback.
A list, is there a list yet of new projects?
Not new, no. I mean, what we have essentially is most of the projects that are on this list, on this current list, would be projects that'll be on the next list. I don't think we have many new additional projects. There might be some electric or street projects, but nothing, we haven't been planning for anything from the general fund other than what's on this list. And again, a lot of these are wants and not priorities, so, that's, are not necessities, so. It's important to keep that in mind. All right, really quick. City manager report, not a whole lot to it. The sidewalk replacement project that's taking place on State Street between Snyder and Lake. It's on the east side of State Street. That's gonna start in mid-September. It has to be completed by October 1st, so they'll start that in the next month. And the water tanks at Kiwanis Park that we're gonna be repainting and repairing that we reviewed earlier this year that we're going to assign our ARPA funds to, American Rescue Plan Act funds. That is going to take place in spring of 2023. So we had slotted it in 2022, but it'll take place in 2023. Other than that, we just have continued to increase people following our social media. We do have, I always like to remind people that we do now send out email notices for meetings, all our city board and commission meetings. We have 81 people signed up to receive email notifications. I just encourage people to continue doing that because you get the agenda emailed in the packet to your email. So, and then as far as boards and commissions, Harbor Commission held a public hearing on the harbor plan update. They reviewed the survey results. Now I'm going to compile all edits and comments for a final harbor plan, 2022 harbor plan to be presented to Harbor Commission in the October Harbor Commission meeting. And once they approve that, they'll send it to council for final review and approval. So I'm the tip of the mitt. Watershed Council has been gracious. They're going to review some of the data and just give us updated data. So I'm still waiting on a little bit more data from them and some others, but pretty much what's on the website as a draft is pretty much what is going to be the final harbor plan. That's all I have.
Do our old business. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for coming.